Resentments are when we feel there's been an injustice, or we've been misunderstood, or somebody has harmed us in some way, and it rents space in our heads. You feel this self-righteous anger and how unfair that was. And if you're like me, you start planning revenge and how you're going to make it right, and the other person is going to realize that you are right and they are wrong. But resentment work is not about being right. Resentment work is about us being okay.
I dreamt that you were twisted through 7.
Hey there, welcome to the Soberful podcast. Today it's just me. It's another solo episode. And I'm going to talk today about the practice of sobriety and what a practice actually is. I've wanted to do this for a while. A good episode to listen to as a accompaniment to this episode is the one that I did at the beginning of the year, 2023, on the sobriety habit. So this is kind of going further into what a practice actually looks like. And the reason that I wanted to record this is I wanted to talk about, there's a lot of misinformation out there online about sobriety and what we need to do to get sober. But I don't see a whole lot about actually developing a personal development practice. And that's what I'm going to talk about. What this is personal development for sober people. And everybody has to do personal development. Not just people who have an alcohol problem. Everybody has to do it, but most people don't realize that. And I see a lot of people sleepwalking through their lives because they don't really know who they are. And sobriety it's a gift, because it gives us this invitation into developing ourselves, personal development. And I'm going to go in depth today in helping you understand what I mean by that. What is personal development? Sobriety requires effort. It's not hard. Having an alcohol problem is hard. Going to work on a hangover. Have you ever been to work on a hangover? Oh my God. So many times I've been to work on a hangover with practically no sleep. It's so hard. It's the worst thing I've ever done. Have you ever woken up trying to manage your feelings of self-loathing and shame and guilt? That's hard. So don't use the words hard when you talk about sobriety and developing a sobriety practice. It's not hard, but it does require effort. Effort feels very different. That feels more open and more possible than hard work. Hard work just doesn't feel very good. I don't want to do any hard work. I'm allergic to hard work. But I do put some effort into my practice because of the payoff, because of the good stuff that's going to come from it. And I'm all about the good stuff. I just want as much good stuff as I can possibly get. So let me clarify. I'm going to be talking about the work of sobriety. Like, what is the work? And I want to tell you what isn't the work. What isn't the work is listening to podcasts or reading Quitlet or over-relying on exercise or following sober social media accounts or even just attending support meetings. None of that is the work. What that is identification and inspiration. It's really getting information. So listening to the podcast, as you're listening to right now, is great because we get some information that we didn't have. We can identify. Lots of you reach out to me and chip and say how much you identify with how we feel or our stories. And hopefully you get inspiration. So all of those things are important, but they will only get you so far. And lots of people are sort of in that loop, right? They keep signing up for the next shiny object, getting some more information and going, oh my God, that's me. Oh, yes. Getting inspired, but actually not knowing what the work really and truly is. So what is the work of sobriety? What does a sobriety practice need to have in it, this personal development? So a sobriety practice is, at its essence, we are revealing ourselves to ourselves. And there's lots of different ways we can do that. It is the revealing of myself, who I am now. There is still more to be known and to be revealed. And I want to tell you, don't miss this. It's the juice of life. It's the point of sobriety. The revelation of why I think the way I do, why I feel the way I do, why I act the way I do. That gives me really essential information about myself that I can then change through my practice. There's a concept called Johari's window. I teach it in a lot of my coaching programs because it's really important to understand at the beginning of the process that I take people through. All of us have parts of ourselves that are known to ourselves and known to others. So, you know that I'm sober, you know that I'm a mom, you know that I'm British and I live in America, I have an American husband. Those are just things that are known by myself and other people. Then we also have parts of ourselves that are known to ourselves, but not known to others. And that's where our secrecy and shame is. So it might be when for a long time you're kind of questioning your relationship with alcohol and you're worried about how much you drink and you kind of feel ashamed, but you're not, to everybody else, you're still presenting as kind of like, yeah, I'll have a drink. So there's a external part of yourself you're showing to the world. And there's an internal part that you're keeping hidden because of shame. And then there's another quadrant that is known to others, but not known to self. And this part's really interesting. A while ago, my best friend, we were having a discussion about something. She was traveling somewhere. And I was like messaging and saying, well, what about this? Or what if this happens? And then what if you do miss your plane, you don't get back and you blah, blah. And she said, Veronica, you really catastrophize things sometimes. And in that moment, I kind of went, oh, because as soon as she said it, I couldn't unsee it. She had revealed something to me that was known to others, but I wasn't aware that I did it. And because she loves me and she's kind, she said it in a way that meant I could hear it. I heard it and went, oh my God, I do that. Ugh. So once it was revealed to me, I was able to see it. And it's something that's now in my awareness. It's now moved to the quadrant of known to self and known to others. We want to grow. We want to learn things about ourselves. We want to stop doing things that maybe impede us or cause issues or whatever. Because I just realized that in our conversation, that wasn't helpful, really, to just kind of think of the 100 things that could go wrong in her journey. So the last quadrant that we all have is parts of ourselves that we don't know about ourselves and is not known to others, yet to be revealed. And that's what I mean by revealing ourselves to ourselves. None of us can stay as we are right now in this moment. We're all being called to grow. We're all being called to grow in different ways, and we need to honor that call to growth. And when we grow, there's always going to be resistance and fear and discomfort because that's part of the process of growth. And in that discomfort and resistance, things are revealed to me about myself that are just extremely helpful. So the practice of sobriety is about revealing ourselves to ourselves consistently. And there's that word, consistently. That's a practice. So what else is in the work? Balancing our fear, that's part of the work. Changing our limiting beliefs to more effective ones. Understanding how our childhood shaped us and letting go of the things that don't serve us. And consistently self-reflecting so we can grow. And that's kind of it in a nutshell. And I'm going to go into those a little bit more in just a second, but I want to talk about some other things first. And I want to just go back to this whole concept of a sobriety toolkit, which I personally dislike. As I explained on the other podcast, the sobriety habit, you're not a car. It's not that you just go along and every so often something doesn't work properly and you get your toolkit out and fix it and off you go. Having a sobriety practice it's the same as exercise, really, right? We all, I think most people listening to this understand that you need to have an exercise practice. You need to be exercising regularly. That's one of the pillars of sobriety. You need to be moving your body for our wellness. We know that our physical health, it's really important that we exercise. We also know that it's important for our mental and emotional well-being as well. And I talk about that in my book, Soberful, about the relationship between how exercise can heal our brains and, make sure that our serotonin levels are working properly and we get such a great dopamine hit from exercise. So we know that exercise is really important. And here's the thing about exercise. About, I don't know, in my early 30s, so maybe 17, 18 years ago now, I really got into running. And I would run a lot. And I could run quite far. I remember when I hit like 10, 12K, oh my God, that runner's high feeling, it just felt amazing. And, I'd be gone for an hour or so and I'd just come back and I just feel incredible. And like, each time I went a bit further and I went a bit further, it was just incredible. I can't run to the end of my street now. That's several reasons for that. Here's the thing. It doesn't matter today that 17 years ago I could run 10K. That's irrelevant. That has no bearing on my fitness and wellness, etc., on how I feel today. What matters with exercise is what I did today. And I'll tell you what I did today, actually. I injured myself skiing at the weekend. And my legs really, really hurt. So actually going on the Peloton is probably going to be ruled out for a few days. But you know what? I took 20 minutes to really stretch because really stretching really benefits me. And so I did that because I know over time, stretching regularly has such a benefit to my well-being. And it's also carving out that time and saying that I'm worth taking care of myself in this way. So what matters is what you do today. So in terms of sobriety, for example, if you are in a 12-step program and you did the steps 4 years ago, that's great. And then you just didn't do anything after that. It's almost irrelevant. It probably helped a bit and you probably had a shift and probably felt pretty good for a while afterwards. But then we just kind of drift back to how we were. And the reason for that is because we don't have a practice. And that's why the whole toolkit concept just falls apart. So this is something that's ongoing. It's not hard. It makes our lives better. So you have other practices. You might have an exercise practice. You might have a work practice. We have lots of different practices and we do them because generally they make our lives better. We feel better. We like the experience. We can see the payoff. So sobriety is just the same. So don't think of it so much as a sobriety practice to keep you sober. I have been doing this stuff for over 20 years. And I don't do it to stay sober. That never occurs to me. I don't think of that. The offshoot of it is that it does keep us sober, but I do it because the personal development practice allows me to grow and my life to expand and for good things and experiences to come into my life. I do it for the good stuff. So let me talk to you about what my sobriety practice is and what it is that I teach in all of my programs, because I'm changing a little bit how I work. This is what I want to lead people through is I want to lead them through the work so that they can build a lifelong practice that's deep, that's meaningful, that's transformational. So the resentment work for me is the absolute pillar of a sobriety practice. It's the most profound and transformational work. The reason for that is we all have resentments. And resentments are when we feel there's been an injustice or we've been misunderstood or somebody has harmed us in some way. And it rents space in our heads, right? You know what I'm talking about when you just go over and over in your mind this event that happened or this conversation you had. And each time you get activated, you feel the feelings again. You feel this self-righteous anger and how unfair that was. And if you're like me, you start planning revenge and how you're going to make it right and how you're going to send an email and you're going to, just put it right. And the other person is going to realize that you are right and they are wrong. And there is something, resentments are so seductive. There is a seduction to the self-righteousness of them, the feeling of self-righteousness and wanting to be right. But resentment work is not about being right. It's not about fairness, and it's not about justice. Resentment work is about us being okay. Resentment work is about, it doesn't matter what is happening in the world. It doesn't matter what has happened. It's that I need to be okay. The magic of doing resentment work, and when I teach this in my programs, I do it in a very specific way. I actually use a method that's based on rational emotive behavioral therapy, REBT. It's very cognitive. And what it does is it takes us through a process that reveals ourselves to ourselves. And what is revealed at the end is that nothing is personal. And many of you listening to this have already been through this process with me. And it's life-changing, because that's where freedom is that I have a choice in how I respond to the events that happen to me. That what other people say and what other people do and all these things that happen around me, they're not anything to do with me, but I make everything personal. There's so many layers to doing the resentment work. What is really revealed in the resentment work is also our limiting beliefs. So when I do this with clients, what they discover, and I love seeing this discovery process in them, is there is an event, and it actually doesn't really matter what it is. It's irrelevant. Could be this, could be that. Someone said something, did something, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. We then make that fit our belief system about ourselves. So X, Y, and Z happened because I'm not good enough. X, Y, and Z happened because people just don't see me. X, Y, and Z happened because I'm not a good person, or whatever it is. We have these very fixed beliefs about ourselves. They come from childhood, and the resentment work will reveal them. And what's revealed is they don't serve us. They don't serve us. There's real consequences. When I believe I'm not good enough, well, how do you think I'm going to act? I'm going to look for things that take away that horrible feeling. I'm going to drink. I'm going to overeat. I'm going to shop. I'm going to make a whole bunch of decisions and take a whole bunch of actions that ultimately don't benefit me but harm me. I have to shift my perception of what it is I think happened. And sobriety that's all it is. Sobriety is simply a shift in our perception. We just see everything differently. And that is why resentment work is such an important part of your practice. Now, I'd love to tell you at almost 23 years sober, not quite, almost, that I walk around in a state of tranquil, loving Zen to the world and to the universe. And the truth is, I don't. The truth is that now I don't get too many resentments. But once in a while I pick one up and they burn me and they rent space in my head. And because this is an infrequent thing, I recognize them and then I write them down so I can be free of them and restored to some kind of balance. So I've been doing this work for over 2 decades, and I want to tell you, in my experience, the resentment work of revealing yourself to yourself, uncovering your belief systems that don't serve you, of being able to shift your perception of what you think is happening, is the most profound and liberating work I've ever done. So that leads me to the next bit that's revealed, which is the limiting beliefs. Limiting beliefs they all come from childhood. Beliefs about ourselves and why the world is the way it is. And those always show up when I'm called to grow. And again, growth is a pillar of sobriety. You are being called to grow. That's just part of the human experience. You're being called to be beyond where you are right now. None of you listening to this can stay where you are right now. You can't, because it would be uncomfortable and painful, because life is calling you to grow. But here's what happens when you get called to grow. You're going to meet fear and resistance. And my pattern used to be, as soon as I met fear and resistance, I would buckle, because those feelings were so uncomfortable. And I would just sabotage whatever it was that I was being called to do, to grow into. And so I was just stuck in this holding pattern of life, being called to grow, but not being able to honor it. So my ongoing practice is to reveal my limiting beliefs in particular situations so I can honor the call to growth. I mean, for example, when I started this podcast 5 years ago with Chip, I mean, I had so much fear and resistance. Oh, this is so stupid. Nobody's going to listen. They're going to think I'm an idiot. Like it's going to fail. Da, da, da. The call to growth was to do the podcast, and the limiting beliefs showed up and tried to keep me small and unchanged. But because I can now navigate past them, they were still there hanging around, but I kept going anyway. Eventually, they just melted away because being able to do a podcast that people wanted to listen to became my new reality, and it became my new normal, and it just became easy. So those limiting beliefs no longer exist. But every time I do a new thing, those show up. And a practice of sobriety is about having a consistent practice to reveal those limiting beliefs, challenge them, and change them to more effective ones, so I can honor the call to growth. So part of my practice also includes regular gratitudes. I write a gratitude list of all the things I'm grateful for. And I also believe that part of your sobriety practice needs to be service beyond yourself. So where we can be of service to others in a way that doesn't benefit us. That can be various different things that we do in the community. It might be with people struggling with an alcohol problem. It could be other things. But I also think that service beyond ourselves is also a really key part of a practice of sobriety. So this is why I wanted to do this podcast. I wanted to kind of be really clear on what the work really is and what is important about this journey of sobriety. I wanted to try and clear up the misinformation I just see online with all of these different programs being offered by different people, most of who are not qualified and have no clinical experience. So I want to ask you today, what is your practice, and where do you need to change things? Where do you need to create time so that you can spend, and again, I just spend a few minutes most days, a few minutes, just getting my journal out, writing out some structured journaling points. I don't like journal. I don't like journaling. I don't just journal. I do structured journaling, which is I write out my resentments, my limiting beliefs, my fears, and my gratitudes. And I write them out in a very specific way. And again, I teach this in a lot of my programs because that just, it just creates something cognitive happens. My thinking shifts. I see things differently, and I'm like, oh, and I'm released and I'm free. And that is why this work is so important. And again, I don't believe this is work that just people with an alcohol problem need to do. This is work that everybody needs to do. Everybody is called to do the work, but not everybody listens. So I hope that you found this helpful today. I have a brand new program, which is really one of the things that I'm just focusing on right now. And it's called the Practice of Sobriety. And it's an 8-month program where I take women through this process of really refining and learning and understanding and embedding a practice that will serve them for the rest of their life. Now, the Practice of Sobriety, you can go to soberful.com. If you are interested in applying, it's only going to be 10 women. It's going to be a small group because we're going to have some weekly group calls. We're going to have some personal calls. And we're also going to have a 2-day in-person retreat. There's some other aspects to it as well, but those are the main parts. If you are being called, if you are ready to do this work, if you are ready to develop a practice and you would like to work with me, please go to soberful.com and apply. Otherwise, I hope that this has been useful to you. I hope that it's given you a really clear idea of what you need to do and what you need to focus on. I want to add, there is some things to add to this. I think exercise is really important. I feel like sometimes people overemphasize exercise, like the exercise is important. You know that because I talk about that as the pillar of movement. But I feel that an over-dependency on it can be problematic. And the reason for that is there's always going to be a time in our lives where we can't exercise because of a health issue or something's going on. So we can't just rely on exercise to manage our emotions and feelings. We need to develop this self-reflection practice. All right, you guys, please let me know what you think of this episode when you see it posted. I'd love to know your thoughts if you have questions. And we'll be back next week. Take care.